For more, though, on Occupy Wall Street and the state of jobs here in the United States, I'm joined now by Bloomberg's Nichols and also Democratic Congressman from New Jersey, Congressman Robert Andrews. Thank you so much, Congressman, for joining us here.
Thank you.
I want to start with Occupy Wall Street, which is a topic obviously Hans is also very familiar with. You've been tweeting, you've been on the internet tweeting quite actively in support of Occupy Wall Street. And of course, one of the criticisms we hear is that they don't have an agenda. What is their agenda, do you think?
Well, they're peaceful protesters saying that the Wall Street agenda has been kind of bad for America. You know, the taxpayers advanced $700 billion to bail out Wall Street. And if you talk to small business people, they can't get a business loan. The housing market's in disarray because of the casino gambling mentality that prevailed there about the credit default swaps and the other instruments. So I think their agenda is to express the fact that the middle class of America is dying or on life support, and something needs to be done about it.
And then if you talk to the bankers, they say, look, they're doing all they can to lend the money out. However, they are being encumbered by regulation.
You know, I've had conversations. I met yesterday with 15 small business people in my district, many of whom were trying to get loans. And when we talked about regulations that were on the bankers can't really name any. I think the fact of the matter is if the bankers can borrow the money at essentially zero from the Fed, and buy T-bills at 200 basis points with no risk, that's what a lot of them are doing, rather than lending the money to small business people. I think we ought to fix that.
You mean they can't name any regulation that's encumbering their business?
If you ask them, they very rarely do they name a specific regulation encumbering their business.
So, Congressman, you're suggesting that the bankers are kind of working the refs here. They're complaining about a problem that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying the problem doesn't exist. I think that they're exaggerating. And I'll tell you what, I'll make you an offer. Bring me on with a banker someday. And he or she can say, look, I want to talk about all these regulations that are stifling us. And I will ask them, name them. And what you'll probably get is the talking points over and over again. On the ground, the reality is people running software companies, machine shops, small businesses can't borrow money. And it's holding them back.
There's some who say, for instance, the capital requirements. That's encumbering them. They're too high. They need to be lowered, that they don't need that big of a capital cushion. There's others that say, look, we can't maybe name you those regulations because those regulations have yet to be written. The Dodd-Frank rules, we still don't know what they are.
So regulations that have yet to be written are restraining them from lending money right now?
Well, it's the uncertainty. It's the uncertainty.
I'll give you some of that. I think that's true, but I think they're exaggerating a lot of it. I think what is certain is that somehow there's an attitude that you can make more money by buying T-bills at no risk than lending money to small business people who create jobs. Now, in part, that's our fault. I mean, maybe what the Fed ought to do is rethink the fact that the window's open at about zero. But listen, you ought to have somebody on the program, again, that runs a gas station or a restaurant and ask them if they've had trouble borrowing money lately. I think the answer will be, yeah, they have.
So what's then slowing down economic growth? Are there regulations out there? Why aren't we seeing the kind of lending that's going on?
I think it's a lack of confidence, that particularly from small business people who are the true job generators. And that lack of confidence, I think, flows essentially from three things in this order. One is a lack of customers. The second is a lack of credit. And then the third is some concern about regulation. I think that it's truly, we got to get the health care bill straight so people really understand what it does and what it doesn't do. I think there's some smaller regulations about the asbestos for home remodelers that I've heard from them that they're concerned about. Mm-hmm. But trust me on this one, when you talk to the actual job generators, regulation is a distant third. This is about the lack of confidence in the small business people that really make the country go.
Congressman, let me just quickly switch topics in the time that we have. You know, Rick Perry is going to be announcing at 11 o'clock his flat tax proposal. A lot of those details have already come out on that. Do the Democrats need to somehow coalesce also around some concrete tax solutions in order to generate, you know, the public interest?
I think we already have. I think Democrats have coalesced around the idea that cutting the deficit is good for the country. It helps that confidence problem that I just talked about. And that the way to cut the deficit is about 2/3 spending cuts and 1/3 taxes, and the taxes should come from the very wealthiest, people making more than $1 million a year, paying a bit more. That's our plan. And Mr. Perry, I think, has a flat campaign, not a flat tax. And I think the fact that he's fallen from, you know, 30% of the vote to 6 or 7.
Although some say that this flat tax is reviving his campaign, though.
We'll see. I mean, I think you know, look, the Republican primary right now is about the search for the non-Romney. For a while it was Michelle Bachmann, then for a while it might have been Chris Christie, then it became Rick Perry, then it became Herman Cain. But it's about anyone who's not Mitt is who they're looking for.
Okay. Congressman, thank you so
Thanks.
much for joining me here in the studio, and also to Hans, who will stay with me through the hour.